Dear guests, welcome to our next session, What's Next for Fintech? A decade since Fintech has started taking off, advocates and market shakers take stock of what has been achieved and what is yet to come. Please welcome the moderator, Susanne Chishti, CEO and investor at Fintech Circle, who will introduce her panel. Susanne, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. Just want to check, can you all hear us? Yes, perfect, great. So welcome to all of you to our panel discussion about what's next in FinTech. And we want to cover, the key FinTech trends. We want to talk about obstacles of growth. And we also want to go into details from each panelist's perspective, what they are working on in 2024, to give you some examples, some case studies of what really matters at the moment in our industry. As I said, my name is Susanne Chishti. I'm the CEO and founder of Fintech Circle and a board member of two listed companies as well. And I'm delighted to have a wonderful panel with me today. Next to me is Karen Zhang. Karen is from Google Cloud. Next to Karen, we've got Kate Goldfinch. Kate is from EBRD NBU. Next to Kate, we've got Veronica Glab, part of Innovate Finance. John Woods. John is part of Zenus Bank. And Stefan is part of the FinTech Trends. So welcome to all of you today. And I look forward to our discussion. What we're planning to do is to talk about trends, obstacles, key priorities first. Then we will open up to you if you want to ask any questions as well at the end. So if you've got any questions you want to ask and raise with our panel, please feel free to do so. So let's start talking about FinTech trends. And I would like to ask each of you now, what do you think are the key trends you see ending this year, starting 2024? What are the key things you think about? What keeps you up at night? What do you see in the market? So if I can start with you, Karen.
Thanks, Suzanne. And I think something that's on the top of the mind for all of us right now is generative AI. Something that we're seeing within Google is the focus within financial services around Gen AI, and more specifically, some use cases that we're helping with fintechs. So we're seeing a few examples in the case of document search and synthesis, especially around regulatory compliance. That's one area that we're seeing a lot of investment and a lot of growth, and really around just understanding how we can get more conversational AI to actually help with the user journey, and also more specifically around how organizations are looking at personalization. So with the customers that I work with across the UK, the fintechs that are exploring and actually building out use cases for AI, constantly it's understanding, okay, what are they trying to achieve? What are the customers that they're working and building for trying to get? And really understanding how we can start to leverage some of these tools to actually build out some tangible outcomes with AI. So that's one of the trends that I'm seeing. The next piece is around embedded finance. There is an increase in the use of embedded finance, and with a lot of my customers, they're seeing this as a massive opportunity where they're shifting from a lot of B2C to actually moving to B2B and banking as a service. And so this is opening up more ways where they can actually go, we've created some really great, for example, core banking offerings, but how can we actually start to shift this, white label this, and move this out for more traditional finance, personal investment, and other sectors. So some of those are the trends that we're seeing at the moment within FinTech.
Great, Karen. Thank you very much. Kate, what is your thoughts?
Yeah, considering that represents in mostly regulatory side, so I would feature the following ones. Maybe the first, it's the switch from technological neutrality for regulators to expanding new technologies, deepen your knowledge, and understanding better those technologies, just supervise it better. Then it's setting up different innovation hubs, regulatory sandboxes, digital sandboxes, so any spaces and legal frameworks just easily allow any innovations to go to the market, so shorten some time to market. And the third one maybe it's arranging open dialogue in between regulators and marketplace, and we see it's quite bright picture. It's AI governance right now in the UK, and arranging frontier AI task forces and different groups of experts, listening to the markets, and then just understanding what is needed on the regulatory space. So it's maybe top 3 from my side.
Wonderful, Kate. Veronica.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of emerging or growing fintech verticals, certainly AI and its capacity for more intelligent decision making, as well as for actually banking the underbanked and and better fraud detection as well, are 2 potential very interesting applications. Embedded finance as well, in terms of trends, and in terms of tech verticals, it's also a lot of the almost boring stuff. It's fintech has grown so much as an industry that it's the fintech, the infrastructure for other fintechs to develop better payments rails. It's the things that we wouldn't really think about that are very exciting to investors as well. But also what's really interesting across global trends is the internationalization of fintech. So we used to see for the past 5 years at least that the top 10 fintech markets for receiving the most capital into fintech venture were 8 out of 10 would always be the US, followed by the UK, and then the top 7 European countries. That's no longer the case. We actually see 4 out of the top 10 markets are now in APAC. And I think that's a trend that is going to continue as well.
Wonderful, Veronica. Thank you. Going to John.
Yeah, thanks. I think firstly, you've said most of the things I wanted to say. So those are the key trends, and building on them. I think one that is really interesting is open banking. Much to your point about the internationalization of it. The UK has been at the forefront. It's been regulatory led. So there's a big framework and it's very accessible, and we're sort of working through the implementation in the UK. But how it's been adopted internationally is very interesting. So in South America, industry has led the way, and industry have created their own regulations and created their own implementation of it. In North America, it's a bit of a bun fight. No one quite knows who's leading, and they're kind of waiting to see which way it flows. And then Asia have their own approach to it as well. So I think there's some really interesting opportunities in platforms bringing together these different techniques and approaches to open finance. And I think that's going to create some big opportunities next year.
Thank you, John. And Stefan, last but not least, what are your thoughts?
Thanks, guys. Before I start with my top 3 fintech trends, I would agree with John. I think open banking, open ecosystems, this whole openness is going to transform industry, and it's starting to happen. And I don't want to repeat, but my top 2 are very popular on today's panel. So my first one is AI adoption and AI-related cost savings. So the AI in finance market will be worth $64 billion by 2030, and AI will decrease operating costs by about $1 trillion by 2030. So huge, huge opportunity, I think, in the industry to really adopt AI in a really smart way across the ecosystem. My second is embedded finance. It's a $63 billion market, poised to become a $250 billion market by 2032. Just look at all the, e-commerce apps and websites and payment gateways that we use to purchase anything and everything across the internet. Things are becoming easier and faster. And so embedded finance is going to be massive. Excuse me. Just think about the buy now, pay later solutions, or there's a platform called MAAST. I would encourage you to look it up. But the whole ecosystem is changing with embedded finance, and it's going to change a lot faster. And my third is biometric adoption, accelerating very quickly. So I think since 2015, we've all experienced some sort of, whether it's fingerprint or face login, but I think the next frontier is voice. Voice login, voice payment, and that type of feature coming through the industry. So I'll just leave it there. Thanks.
Wonderful, Stefan. Thank you to all of you. So great trends. So when you think about what comes next year, you've got, in summary, those key themes. I guess one theme which we also see in FinTech Circle emerging is green FinTech. We call it green finance, green FinTech. And it's all about the sustainability agenda. You know, how can companies have a purpose? How can we be more sustainable, both as individuals, but also as companies? And how can the fintech sector help to decarbonize and to get to a low carbon economy? And we only have got 25 years left. I mean, we always talk about it as if it's such a long time, but in order to get to net zero by 2050, it's literally 25 years to go, and we need everybody, every company, no matter how big or small, you know, we need to get our act together to really move into this transition planning mode to move towards a low carbon economy. And lots of fintech companies, of course, play in this space. You know, these are the ones which we call green fintech. And that's a huge opportunity for them to help others to either measure their carbon footprint, to reduce their carbon footprint, or just track the transition plans as well. So these are key trends, you know, to take away for today. So now let's go to the obstacles. You know, we all have seen a year with high inflation rates, a year where the public is even more under strain, you know, with high inflation rates, cost of living crisis, lots of debt across the country, but also globally. And we have seen that also in our fintech sector. And I wanted to check with all of you now, which are the key obstacles you have seen in your areas, and what do you think can be done to overcome them? So if I start now with Stefan on your end, and then we go the other direction.
Sure, great. So thanks for picking me first this time. So really 3 high-level bullets really for this question. One is, obstacle number 1 for me is the cost to replace legacy technology and systems, cost, resource, time. I've been through it. It's tough in many different ways. The second is legacy employees. Transforming the mindset of legacy employees is extremely difficult. I've been through it twice. And being the agent of change is not easy. You can easily become unpopular. And the third is regulation. I don't think there's much to say more than just regulation is definitely not always easy when you're looking to transform the industry. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Stefan. Stefan?
Yeah, so from our side, Zenus is a US bank. We allow people to open a US bank account from any 180 countries. You don't need to be a US citizen or resident or US registered company. So from that lens of international banking and the banking as a service and embedded banking, I think the challenges for next year are mainly around regulations. It's so nascent as an industry that the regulators are still trying to catch up. And we've seen banking as a service providers stopped, prevented from offering their services, mainly because they don't necessarily have scalable platforms in place or systems and processes in place, but equally because no one quite knows what they're meant to be doing and what the regulations and standards are. So changing regulations are always a certainty. I think they're going to be a bigger certainty for next year. And then there's other crosswinds and headwinds with wars and economic climate globally as well.
So not an easy environment, John, you're right. Yeah, Veronica.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that as well. I mean, if you know, taking geopolitics or the unignorable macroeconomic situation aside, I think you have to look market by market. You know, in the UK, for instance, one of our biggest challenges is the availability of growth capital. That's something that we're at Innovate Finance actually campaigning for in partnership with some of our partners to the regulator and to different government agencies as well, as how do you encourage IPOs in London? How do you encourage more growth capital post Series C, more of that investment? You know, versus in the US, you have a completely different regulatory environment, but at the same time, you have a lot of capital available and risk appetite from investors. So you have to completely look at the market in which you're operating, because then coming back to the UK, we have a very fintech-friendly regulator here. We have a cohesive fintech ecosystem, so we can do a lot of that advocacy work. But again, that's not the case in the US, or it might not be the case in other markets.
Very good thoughts, Veronica. Yes.
Absolutely agree with Stefan and all other participants regarding simplification of regulation, and we see like the trend right now. So it's like the high demand on plug-and-play regulation, let's say, and we see like example on AI as well, governance here in the UK. This principle-based approach, it's from the one hand, let's say, and another hand, it's high risks fields can be just regulated harder, and what we see again on this principle-based and regulation in the UK, and like lower risks fields can be like more simplified, because we all understand about IML, CFT, and all fraudsters and cyber attacks and something like that. So it shouldn't be simplified totally, but just considering particular risks. Again, regarding internationalization and all those opportunities to different markets, from the regulatory side, it's a Global Financial Innovation Network, for example, and some piloting platforms like cross-border platform that allows different regulators and their startups to test innovations in these environments, not just being registered on those markets. So the opportunity like this, it's as well internationalization and cross-border, like cross-geographical any collaborations as well. It's very important right now. And among obstacles, I would mention for emerging markets is lack of funding. And so maybe these cross-geography collaborations can help as well.
Good points, yes. And Karen?
I feel like a lot of the panelists have covered things that I want to mention, but just doubling down on what you mentioned, Stefan, around cloud adoption, transformation. I've been through a lot of transformations and migrations myself, and a lot of times, we were saying this before the panel, is that it's a lot of times not a technology problem, it's a people problem, and it's actually getting the business on board, supporting that journey, and actually going through and being inquisitive, being curious, and shifting the mindset of the organization. That's one of the biggest obstacles that I come face to face with. Also in terms of actually fundraising as well. At the moment, a lot of the startups, a lot of the scale-ups that I work with, don't have a lot of fundraising, and I've had to see firsthand a lot of my customers go out of business this year, unfortunately. So that's been a huge factor in terms of the high interest rates, the difficulty to actually access capital. That is a huge obstacle, and I hope that that is starting to shift. There is a lot of dry powder in the economy, and UK is still one of the highest invested VC-backed markets for fintechs. So I am optimistic in what's to come for next year, but I think just this year in general has been a survival year. And a lot of my customers are just looking to optimize, to cost save, and to be really thoughtful with where they direct their teams, their resources. And then in terms of regulation and compliance, one of the acts that have come out recently is DORA. So you might have heard of the Digital Operational Resiliency Act, which is requiring financial institutions operating in the European market to really think about how they're treating security and cyber threats over the next few years, and they will need to have things in place by the start of 2025. So one big obstacle for organizations now is really thinking about their security posture. How are they actually building? And cloud partners like ourselves are actually a huge organization, a vendor that they can collaborate with to really leverage our security posture and our security best practices to build that into their organizations, their processes, and their people. So that's both an obstacle and opportunity that I'm excited about.
Very good points, Karen. And when I think about what all of you just said, I would say one of the leadership challenges often which I see at boards, which I see at startups across the whole range of fintech companies, financial services companies, is it's very hard to understand a different perspective or understand somebody who's got the opposite view which you have got. And I thought about this morning because I did yoga this morning and I did a headstand this morning. And when you do a headstand, I don't know who of you does yoga, you see the world literally 180 degrees differently. But it's still a reality, it's the same. Do you know what I mean? I've got the same reality when I stand up and I've got the same reality when I'm upside down. And I thought that's what we have to keep in mind when we discuss with counterparties, colleagues who might have the opposing views, that both of our reality is actually correct, but we need to find a compromise. We need to find a solution forward which works, for all of us. That's, I think, relevant for many areas which we touched upon today. In terms of fundraising, I agree with everything what you said. We see the same thing. We see often growth capital is missing. And now what I've just been asked today is there's a study has been done to assess pension funds and how pension funds in the UK invest their money. And the interesting result which came out was that the majority of pension funds underinvest in UK equities, which is very interesting. Because when you think about a UK pension fund, you would expect them to invest in UK equities because they're based here. And you would expect them not just to be in the same fashion as the index, the benchmark they're measured against, but you would expect them to overweight UK equities normally. That's what most other countries do. They overweight their own local companies in their local equity funds. And in the UK, it's the other way around. So the UK pension funds underweigh UK equities, which of course starts almost like a funding issue at the top of the market, which trickles down to the bottom. And there's a letter being written as we speak to our Chancellor, which might be talked about at the autumn statement, which is coming very soon, about this topic. How can we encourage later stage investors to invest more locally? And this trickles down to VCs, to PE investors, to help us get more growth capital, which the country needs so much. So important obstacles to overcome, and I think the good thing is always if you know about them. The key thing is to acknowledge that they exist, because then we can do something about. And I think hopefully this year helped us. Like you said, we have been in a survival mode to discover all these issues. They all came to the surface. And now we need to solve them. I think that's a goal probably for 2024. And so with that said, I would actually like you to ask you, what are your goals? What are your priorities, for the next year? And if I can start with Karen, so what comes next for you, and what will you focus your time on next year?
That's a big question. There's a lot. I guess we're all just kind of running at the moment. Q4 is one of the busiest times. But there's a few things I'm particularly excited about for next year. In particular, working with the fintechs that I do across the UK, really now providing technology is not enough. So every organization is providing cloud infrastructure, data, Gen AI, all of the tooling, but now it's really understanding how can we actually strategically partner with them. And so what I'm seeing with my organizations and fintechs is actually thinking about how can we drive their top line revenue. So how can we build go-to-market partnerships? And one example of that, actually a few examples we've been working on has been with, for example, Bud Financial, Thought Machines, actually helping them actually move from a B2C organization to B2B and getting them onto places like the Google Cloud Marketplace, where they're looking at expanding to new regions. So if they're operating in the UK market and they want to move to the US, how can we actually help through our platforms and our organization to really get them new customers and actually attract that new business? So that's kind of the top line piece. And on the other side, it's thinking about how can they actually optimize their current cloud costs. So going through that cloud transformation, that modernization, how can we actually drive that product change and that product growth? I guess the second piece as well, both an area that I invest a lot of time into at the moment. Sometimes I mentioned fraud being a big area and an obstacle, really. And we're seeing that now, actually this year, there was $219 billion that was lost to fraud just this year alone. So that's actually the same amount that the UK government spent on healthcare. So just let that stat just sink in for a little bit. And noting that a lot of organizations are experiencing fraud challenges. Like my customers have APP fraud as a big issue, so authorized push payment fraud. That's gone up 22% year on year, and that number's going to double by 2026. So these areas are both, again, obstacles, but it provides an opportunity for organizations like our own to actually come in and help in this. So one solution that we recently announced was AML AI. It's anti-money laundering AI. We partnered with HSBC on this solution, and we launched it a few months ago, and we've already seen massive improvements in large institutions. So in the case of HSBC, they've managed to improve and spot out fraud by 4 times more just through this AML AI. They're finding 60% improvements in detecting false positives, and there's just a wealth of benefits from a regulatory and compliance standpoint that we're seeing. Now that's just one of the many solutions that we have, again, within the financial services space. And again, just this is specific to security and kind of fraud, but there's a lot of areas that we're seeing, the generative AI and some of the tasks, some of the solutions that we're building out being of massive value to our customers. And I guess just probably like rounding out, generative AI is going to be a huge, huge focus. I actually just came out of a 2-day hackathon with one of my customers. They had 15 teams, 100 people hacking away and building out ideas all around the cost of living, actually. So it was Zopa Bank. They're one of the key partners behind the Fintech Pledge. And for those that might have heard of the Fintech Pledge, it's a consortium of fintechs across the UK that are coming together to really think about the current cost of living crisis and how, as individual organizations, they can help to bring about more positive action. So if you want to sign up, if you're a fintech yourself, it's pledge.org. I think we've already actually achieved 8 million out of 25 million positive outcomes around like improving savings, consolidating utilities, improving credit scores. So these are just some of the examples that I'm really excited to be partnering on and really just helping these organizations to accelerate their growth, accelerate the products that they're building out and thinking about their obstacles and challenges in a more thoughtful manner.
Excellent, Kate. So a positive year ahead. Yes, exciting year ahead. Wonderful. So, Kate, in your case, I mean, I know that you have worked the last 4 years for a central bank building up the regulatory sandbox. And to what extent can a regulatory sandbox being used for the new future of AI and generative AI?
Thanks a lot for this question. So really, I just was focused last 4 years on this project, and this year we launched Regulatory Sandbox, and it's a prototype of FC and Sandbox, and it was strong collaboration on this project. And the next step is Digital Sandbox and Trustworthy AI concept. And I'm working on this right now. So as well as like following FC experience, and it's absolutely amazing. Yeah, maybe the next year it will take just my focus will be on this and how it helps. It's interesting in interconnection to AI and some recommendations by OECD that provides just some advice to use this tool, regulatory tool, like the opportunity to mitigate any AI models risks, just to pilot it previously on the synthetic data, and then to go ahead on the market and to real customers. So it is the case.
Excellent, Kate. Thank you. And Veronica, coming to you as Head of Partnerships and Investment Lead for Innovate Finance, what does your calendar look like when you plan ahead for next year?
Yeah, well, there's a couple things on our agenda. Regulation not being the least of them, particularly on APP fraud scams. The fintech sector is one that is disproportionately affected for the liabilities when 80% of these scams actually originate on social media. So one thing that we're working towards is better cross-industry dialogue to think about where that burden of responsibility has to lie across industry so that we can continue to both favor innovation but still protect the customer above all. So that's one big thing that's on our agenda. Coming up into January, I'll be putting out our next investment report. So based on what are some of the biggest trends that will highlight a lot of our key priority areas for what the fintechs themselves, where they need the most support from an organization such as ourselves, and particularly encouraging VCs to fund more diverse founders. Women still continue to receive under 5% of venture capital funding in the fintech sector in the UK. This has not changed in 10 years. I think the most we received, we as women in fintech, was 10% of the share. It's now down to 5%. It's not great. So that is a really, really key part of our agenda. And then in April, we'll be hosting UK FinTech Week starting on the 15th and 16th of April. So it's a very positive thing that we're looking towards. And I definitely encourage anyone, if they're interested in joining us for the Innovate Finance Global Summit, then to come find me after the panel.
Yes, I can definitely say Innovate Finance Global Summit is a fantastic conference, one of the highlights, of the fintech calendar every year. So everybody should join. Thank you, Veronica. Coming to you, John, in terms of brokers, we know our conference here is there are lots of leading brokers in the fintech sector, in the financial service sector here. And where do you see the opportunities for brokers in the next 12 months?
Yeah, I think from the sessions I've heard this morning, I think there's a common theme coming through for the brokers, which is around payments and the new payment rails and the new opportunities, not just for B2B payments through those networks, but also through consumer payments. So there's the likes of Visa Direct, MasterCard Send, which are card-to-card and card-to-account payments. I don't think they've penetrated the client market very well because they haven't used their brand names. They're being used under other company names, so consumers don't necessarily know that they're using them. But there's a lot of opportunities becoming available to brokers to lower the costs of money movement, and enable more ways for funds to be uploaded to trading accounts from different countries. So I think that's a really interesting space. The other interesting space, I'll take a different spin on the AI side, and with a marketing hat on. I think there's a load of fun to be had in the next year with generative AI. In our team, we've been doing some fun things around writing and producing material, testing creative, and rather than engaging an ad agency to come up with creative ideas and putting those out and paying a lot of money to come up with them, you can spin things up really quickly, test a concept, see if it works, and then go out. So I know you, Stefan, you're positioning it as a loss of headcount and how it's going to save costs, but I think there's a lot of fun to be had with it as well. So I think there's sort of two sides to the next year.
Wonderful, Sean. So I think so far all our panel members are very positive about next year. Hopefully all of you are too. Let me ask Stefan, what do you think about 2024 and where do you plan to spend your time on and what will you focus on?
Sure, thanks. Good question. So I would say, I've only been in the space for 15 years in fintech. So I think looking at the broad spectrum of where industry is going, where we're at today, we have a long way to go. Okay, so transformation is happening and we have a long way to go. So where am I going to spend my time? Definitely on corporate and fintech for corporate and fintech for charity in terms of transforming both sides of the spectrum. I think there's a lot to be done. And that's just, by keep doing what I'm doing, So very short, simple answer, but a lot is going on, so stay tuned. Yeah.
Okay, I was looking forward to the future. All of us, I think that's the key thing. We all need to be positive to make the future shape and make the future happen. I, as an investor, as a fintech investor, and I'm an angel investor, so early stage, fintech investor, and we run our fintech investor network, where we're a group of 70 plus angel investors, where we invest our own money in fintech companies. And we think from an investor point of view, it is a great time to move in, to get into the market, to invest now, because some valuations, so many of valuations actually came down. So if you want to invest, you can invest at lower prices, lower costs, and hopefully participate in all the upside, which is going to happen in the next few years. So it's when I remember my days at Morgan Stanley. At Morgan Stanley, we said those years are good vintage years, and good vintage years is the year you start to invest, because it's when do you get in, when do you get out. You want to get in when costs are low. You want to get out when prices are high. Ideally, because then you maximize your profit. So hopefully that's will be the case. So I think that we have this year, next year as really good vintage years to invest. In terms of female investments, I agree with what Veronica said. It is shocking. I didn't even know that numbers went further down. I knew that initially it was 10% or less that female-led companies received funding. That it went further down is really shocking. And anything we can do together to help work on that, I would be very happy to do that. I know that I attend a conference in a week's time on this topic by the UK British Angel Association, which is about women investing in women as well, and how to help female-led entrepreneurs, which is really important. So we have got now 6 minutes left to take questions from the audience. So who has got a question for us? Please come, just raise your hand, and we come with a microphone to you. So we've got one microphone is coming, so who wants to have the first question? So I can't see, it's a little bit dark. So if I don't see one yet, so then maybe I have got one. Do you see somebody? I can't see one yet. Okay, I've got a question for all of you, and you can choose who wants to respond to that. And it's about leadership. You know, we talked about leadership as one challenge in our uncertain times. And I guess the reason why, because it requires new ways of leadership. You know, it doesn't, the old ways of leadership often don't work anymore, but nobody knows what are the new types of leadership which actually can work in our times, in our uncertain times, times where we want to focus more on equity, focus more on inclusion, on diversity. So who has got ideas of what type of leaders we're looking for and what type of leaders we can be ourselves to make a difference?
I have a question. Just yesterday I moderated the panel discussion about leadership. And so my point, like top 3, is diversity and inclusion. So it's about this. The second one, and ambidexterity. It's the equal operating of your left and right hand, what means to run your business like current business and to look into the future. And the third one is extra resilience, definitely, and to be prepared to everything. And so just yesterday, my morning started from podcast with Elon Musk that spoke about aliens, about any AI risks, about any war conditions, war nature of human beings. And so it's all about this. You should be prepared to absolutely everything.
Yes, good point. Yes, John.
Yeah, a different view on that as well was that I think with the challenging times ahead, resilience is going to be a key word. But in terms of leadership, I think good leaders in that space either absorb or deflect pressure from their teams and allow their teams to operate without that pressure on top of them. So I think that's going to be something for the next year that we'll hear a lot more about.
I like that. Very good. Yes, Stefan.
I would say we got to be more open, more collaborative, more transparent, and just be able to share more cross divisions, departments within the firm. Yeah, I think these things are key. It builds resilience and sort of manages risk within the business, but also makes people feel a bit more secure and included and part of the journey. I think that's a big change that we're seeing at the moment.
Yes, good point, Stefan. Yes, Karen.
I think just adding to that, just more authentic leadership. Like I think a lot of times, you know, everyone's got this facade on and we're trying to run and you're a startup and you want to be, you know, showing that we're doing everything well and everything's going, you know, gung-ho. But I think the more that we have honest conversations and really connect and share with within these communities, like the real learnings as a leader, the more vulnerability that you show, I really see that teams feel empowered by that and they feel like they have the autonomy and the ability to be transparent and to be more honest. So I'd love to see more leaders showing up more authentically and empowering their teams that way.
Excellent. Great comments, Karen. So I think these are the key highlights. Hopefully you've got some key lessons to take away about what are the trends in our industry and that the future is bright. You know, the future, all of us, we had a really positive outlook into 2024. And I think it's an interesting time because we are almost in December now, where we all make our plans and our wishes for the next year. And I think all of us, of course, all of you in the audience, all of us are leaders in our industry. We all want to change, otherwise we wouldn't be here. So I think it's up to us to make the world a better place. I mean, it sounds big and enormous of a task, but at the end of the day, we can all shape the future of fintech. And maybe that's, you know, the question of our panel was what's next? And I think what's next for fintech is what we make it. You know, all of us, we create the sector, we shape the sector, and we will grow the sector together. And so that's what's next. It's what we are doing it together.